Hi everyone, Matt Bailey here. You may notice that today's not an episode. There's no fancy intro. This is not a part of our feed. It's just me and a microphone. And that's because earlier this year, we lost a giant in the magic world in February of this year, February 18th, 2016 to be exact. Mr. Tom Mullica passed away at age 67. Now, Tom would come to mean a lot to me personally and professionally. His interview that he did with the show aired, which we're going to air at the end of this. It was somewhere, I believe his episode was number 56 on this show, which at the time was called Ventriloquism Weekly. And through that interview, he would come to mean a lot to me, both personally and professionally. And I wanted to do this today as a tribute to Mr. Mullica, and I don't want it to be about me at all. In fact, it was kind of weird. I was on the fence about doing this, but the decision to do it ultimately won out. But what put it in my head was after he passed, people would say, Matt, you should share this interview that you did with Tom. You should share it. And I said, no, I don't want to. And people posted it. But people would post it. It just made me uncomfortable. I wasn't going to share the old episode and be like, hey, we had Tom way back when. I didn't want to do that. And we'll get to a little bit more about what the interview meant for me and to me in a little bit. But thinking about it, and that it actually does mean a lot to me personally, I thought I would be in such remiss if I didn't do something, but I don't want it to be a me fest. How could I do this? So I thought, well, I've gotten to know a lot of magicians through this same show. I'll just reach out to them for a quote. And that's what I did. So, but before I did, I should tell you this story because it'll be relevant when we get into the quotes. I didn't want to interview Tom. I knew what a giant he was. I was familiar with his work, and I didn't want to interview Tom Mullica because I was terrified. So I was worried to do this, and Michael Knight, bless his heart, said you should interview Tom. I said I don't want to do it. He said, you're going to interview Tom and I'm going to set it up. So I said, okay, fine. And that's how I got Tom. We'll talk a little bit about what that interview meant in a minute, but to set it up. But I want to get to these quotes because Tom Mullica was and is, that's important, is a giant in this industry. And I have about 4 or 5 quotes that'll exemplify that. We begin with the gentleman who put the idea to do this tribute in my head, Mr. Scotland. Tom was an all-around performer, part magic, part clown, part vaudeville, part circus, all rolled up with study and practice to deliver a rarity in entertainment. The showman with a heart. Next, we have somebody I got to know in the early days of the show, Mr. Mike Bent. When I first met Tom Mullica, I was nervous. Many times when you meet a legend, it's a disappointment. They don't live up to the hype. Well, Tom exceeded the hype. He was funny, talented, and very sweet. He had a genuine interest in other people and couldn't have been nicer. We've lost a real treasure. Mr. Ken Scott. Tom was a brilliant and creative thinker. He knew what was funny. Tom was also generous with his time with other magicians. His bar he owned, the Tomfoolery in Atlanta, was an icon for so many years. I'm so grateful that I got to work with Tom last summer at the IBM convention, and then we had a great talk at Magic Live in August. I will cherish our little talk forever. Tom had a contagious laugh that will be greatly missed. Thanks, Tom. And the reason I mentioned Michael earlier is so that you'd understand what Tom meant to Michael, what Michael means to me, and how the three of us came to make this the interview you're going to hear. So this is Michael, and it's a beautiful little tribute. So here we go. I'm not sure what I could say about Tom Mullica that people don't already know. If you ever got to meet Tom, it would be a time of your life that you would never forget. The first time I got to correspond with him was when I sent him a letter. He closed his show with a joke that made me laugh so hard, and I asked if I could use that joke. He was surprised I took the time to ask, as anyone else would have just taken the joke. It turns out it was not his joke to give, it was Bob Lewis's. Tom and I started a friendship, in a way, with that letter. I later got to work with Tom a few times, from lectures to magic conventions to having him perform his Red Skelton tribute show. I even spoke to him via email a few months ago. He was always kind and ready to help. Tom would always put the show first, and I think that's what made him a great entertainer. He did not worry about what was publicly correct. He worried about what would make people laugh. He always had a joke no matter what the situation, but knew when to open his heart. When my youngest son died, Tom was the first person in the entertainment world, to reach out to me. His heart was as big as his laugh. He will always be a part of this world because of all the videos you can find on YouTube, but more so because of other entertainers that he helped to become the performers they are. I know I would not be the entertainer I am if not for Tom Mullica. Thank you for all the laughs and for all we will make because of you. Beautiful, Michael. We end our quote section with something short and sweet from Mr. Lance Burton. Tom Mullica was that rare combination, a great magician and a hysterical comedian all rolled into one. More importantly, he was truly kind and a generous soul. I was privileged to be his friend for over 30 years. Thank you so much, Mr. Burton. Now we move on to the interview and what Tom meant to me. Again, I really became familiar with Tom's work after Michael said, we're going to do the interview. I knew about the Cigarette Act. I knew about Letterman. But I really dug in after booking the interview, and I came to love his work. And so I was excited. And those of you that listen to the show, you know I'm just happy. I want to talk about positive. And he was the first person to come on and go, no, I'm going to keep it real. Because I think the tendency when you want to talk about the industry is to want to sort of, and I know Tom would say it, is to kind of want to blow smoke. But Tom came on and said, no, this is where I am right now, and you're going to hear about it. And Michael will tell you, I was terrified to air that interview. And it became, to me and to the people that listen, one of the most memorable pieces thus far in the show. And that's not me. That's not a toot my own horn. That's Tom. That's just how Tom is. And I can't wait for you to hear this. So I knew I wanted to put this together. I hope we're doing Tom's memory justice today. And I'm not going to rejoin you after the interview as I normally do. I am just going to let the interview be. So I'll give you this closing thought. Having just rewatched the movie Lincoln again, this occurs to me. Tom's magic has always been for the ages, and now Tom Mullica belongs to the ages. Here now, in tribute, our 2014 interview with Tom Mullica. Tom Mullica, welcome to Ventriloquism Weekly. How are you today, sir?
Very good. Thanks for asking.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. It's quite an honor to have you. I've looked up to your career for quite a while now, and I just want to dig right in. How did you get started in entertaining and magic, and what was your beginnings?
Well, I'm from Wisconsin, and I enjoyed magic as a kid, and my mother gave me a magic set for Christmas, which is the start of most magicians' careers, and the interest just kept going. I did my first show in 4th grade, and I've been doing magic most of my life.
That's awesome. So, what did those first shows consist of for you? What type of magic were you doing in grade school?
Oh, just the normal stuff you get in a magic kit, stuff that works by itself. I wasn't very technically involved at all at that point. I was just a kid,
Yes.
Most of those tricks in those kits just work themselves.
Yes. And so when did you go professional and start doing it full time?
When I got out of the Army in '69.
Oh, well, thank you for your service. That's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and I got to ask, because this is Ventriloquism Weekly. I'm very curious because I love the character. I was watching some YouTube videos this morning. Duke.
I understand that.
Oh, okay. Yes, just to let our listeners know, we're struggling with a bit of a bad connection here. I said, when did Duke come into the picture? Your rabbit character.
Oh, when I opened the Tomfoolery in 1976, and I started doing him about a year later. It was about 1977 or 8.
Yes, and can you talk about the Tomfoolery Club? How did that come about? What made you decide to open a magic club and theater and be the headliner?
Well, I attended bar, and I did magic behind the bar when I was in high school. And then I went to bartending school when I went to Atlanta. And after I graduated bartending school, I worked as a bartender, and I did magic behind the bar, which eventually led to me opening my own place.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And going from there, is that when you started doing the your famed cigarette routine? I want to really dig into that because I just love that routine. How did that come about?
That happened a couple years later, about the same time, but Duke, I think, came first, and then about a year later, I started doing the cigarette routine. I was always doing cigarette magic, so I just eventually ended up with that routine. I just threw a cigarette in my mouth, and I got a laugh, so I figured if 2 went in there, you get a bigger laugh, and I just kept going and going, and it just sort of evolved as it went along the years, and it became a signature piece of mine.
Yes, and it's wonderful. You say you always liked cigarette magic. What about that such a specific type of magic? And of course, you do it beautifully. What about that type of magic drew you to it?
What about that kind of magic, did you say?
Yes. What drew you to cigarette magic?
I saw someone on television reach up in the air and produce a lit cigarette, and I just found that impossible. How can you hide a lit cigarette? So that probably is what first sparked the interest. And then I bought books on cigarette magic and so forth, and I just learned as much as I could. And I just always found it a very interesting medium because having something burning on your body, how do you hide that,
Right. Right. And actually, you hit on something I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I don't want you to reveal anything. I know I don't want you to reveal anything, and that's certainly not the point. But our mutual friend, Michael Knight, who I want to thank and credit for introducing the program to you, and you're here now because of that, he said that you've told him you almost can't rehearse that routine because it hurts so much.
That's true. I used to burn the hell out of myself.
That's not good. And but you can do it in the moment. Talk about, so a lot of it is audience fueled. You can deal with the pain when the audience is giving you the energy.
That's pretty much it. And the paycheck helps too.
Yeah. That it does. That it does.
People come up to me all the time and ask me questions like, What's your deep thought or your theory behind this? I have no deep thoughts or theories about anything. I just do what I do because when I was a kid, that's how I did it, and I just kept doing it. And I've been taught in magic that if people don't like you, it doesn't matter what you do. So I try to have likability, and when I work places, people enjoy the kind of presentation that I give. But I've never analyzed any of this about pain or the audience and how do I think they react to it. I've never had that.
Right.
So
that's a very interesting and very cool way to think about it. Just don't overthink it, right?
Yeah, I never have thought about it. I just do it. If somebody asks me why did you do this or why did you do that, it's like saying to a painter, why did you make this blue instead of red, and why was that stroke? That you can't. There's no reason, or there's not necessarily something that you're thinking about. It's just the way you are. Everyone's different. If you told 100 people to walk across the room, everybody would walk across the room in a different way. There's not one way of doing anything. So I just found a good way to put my magic with my personality, and people bought it, and I have a fun time doing it, but I don't analyze it at all.
Do you think we overanalyze things in entertainment?
Yes.
That's a very I love hearing such a different way of thinking about it and just sort of just doing it. And so I want to talk about some of your influences because how I know you and how I was introduced to your work was through I've visited Branson many times and I've seen your I've seen promos and videos of you doing an incredible Red Skelton tribute. Can you talk about how that got started? And you're the only approved, or I guess the word is approved, licensed Red Skelton tribute from the estate. How did that come about?
Well, that's about 4 questions. So I basically met Red Skelton in the 80s, and we became friends. And when he passed away in 1997, I did a tribute show to him, and I toured around the country I've been doing it for 17 years now. So as I was touring, and when Red passed away, eventually I got to know his wife, and we became friends, and I went to Vincennes, Indiana, where he was born and raised, and I helped open the theater and the museum there. I've done 4 performances there. So I did it because he was a friend of mine, and I really liked him, and I want to keep that style of humor alive. It's not like I went out just to find someone to impersonate. He was a friend of mine, so I wanted to keep his style of comedy alive.
Wonderful. Do you think in our modern day of comedy we're losing that important style?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this is my last year doing the show because the audiences aren't the way they were 17 years ago. Kids are different than the way they used to be. A kid, the last thing they want to do is go see a show. They want to play with their iPhones and they want to do other things. It's not the same when I was a kid. When I was a kid, theater and live entertainment was the thing. Mm-hmm. Today, the thing is disc jockeys and going to rave parties and playing with your phone and doing other things. The kids could care less about going to theaters, and the older people that remember Red Skelton in general are too old to be going out to shows at 7 or 8 at night. He would have been 101 years old this year, so right. His popularity is getting smaller and smaller every year.
And but it's still such a wonderful type of comedy that I think. Do you think we'll ever come back around to it in terms of our interest in humor?
No, there's no way back. There is no humor in America. Someone asked me the other day, "Who's your favorite comedian?" I can't think of anybody. There's nobody that makes me laugh. Situation comedies on television are all filthy.
Right.
It's all, I don't watch television anymore. When I was a kid, every single program was wonderful. There wasn't anything bad on. Kids today, when I shake hands after my show and I shake a kid's hand, they put their hand in my hand like it's a mop. They don't even know how to shake hands.
Right.
And young girls have this scowl on their face, and they just walk around like they're mean, like they have this attitude, and they think they are entitled to things, and they don't have the respect for older people like I did when I was a kid. It's all changing, and it's never going to come back. You'll never see the likes of those great entertainers in the 40s and 50s and 60s. It's just entertainment is changing.
It is. And so obviously what you're saying is it's changing for the worse. How can it change for the better? What has to happen?
I have no idea. If I knew that, or if anybody knew that, I just don't think it'll change. It can't go back to the way it used to be. There's no way it could go back to the way it used to be. It's a slower, older way of doing things, and the world is in too fast a pace right now with communications and social media. They want everything right now. A kid doesn't want to practice, and he doesn't want to spend years and years and years on an act. They want to start him right now.
Right.
These young kids think they can just go on television and America's Got Talent, and they get on there and they win an award, and now they're going to be a successful act. That has you go back to a lot of those America's Got Talents, you don't even know who those people were. You'd never see them again because they were seen on television. The networks made money, and they went home, and basically some of them made more out of their careers, the ones that stuck to it. Mm-hmm. But entertainment is not going to change back. Just like Branson. When I came here 12 years ago, it was unbelievable. Right. Half the theaters are closed now. I'm doing shows. I made more money in high school than I'm making right now.
Huh.
It's absolutely crazy. Nobody wants to pay you. No one wants to pay a professional entertainer because they know they can get out someone of less quality for a tenth of the cost.
Right. It's a shame. What has happened to the respect? You've obviously watched it wane. Why is it waning? What about our mentality?
Because of our lifestyle. Our lifestyle. It's too fast. The social media. The whole world is interested in what everybody else is doing. I could care less. I just want to make a living, and I just want to do my thing. Well, you're going to be left behind if you stay out of the social media and stuff. And as I get older, I don't even want to be part of it. It's nothing I'm interested in. I don't care what other people are doing, and I don't want them to know what time I brushed my teeth or where I went today,
right?
What I bought today. I don't want selfie pictures. It's just, to me, it's all crazy. I'd rather. I've been working on a new act for 2 years, and I just found out today I'm going to do it in England in less than a month. I'm going to be doing it in England in less than a month from now. And I just got an email from the guy, and he said, well, the venue where you were going to perform, they don't allow any open flame, smoke or flash paper, anything. Well, my whole act is around smoking, so I'm obviously not going to get that. I don't know what's going to happen, but just a situation like that. Years ago, every theater was smoking. When I started the Red Skelton Tribute show, there were dinner theaters around the country. There are very, very few dinner theaters because of the recession we had, when all these people and these poor people are losing their money, and they can hardly feed their families, and they don't have health care. How do you expect them to go pay $50 to go see a show? They don't do it. They haven't got the money.
Right.
Show business is going. I know acts in Las Vegas that are working for a tenth of the money they used to because they're trying to pay their rent. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely crazy. And television is making it worse and worse and worse.
Under the guise of helping it, right? It likes to make the public think it's helping live entertainment, but it's really hurting it.
No, it's all about money.
Right.
They don't care. They don't care about that. They just want high ratings, and they want a popular show, like the Kardashians and all this stuff. It's like, I just don't believe it. I don't understand how someone with no talent can make so much money. And I know a lot of talented people, and they're not working. They haven't worked in years. It's sad. It's like when the vaudeville quit.
Right.
When the vaudeville went from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, there were hundreds and thousands of acts, the greatest acts in the world. They were played all over. Well, once they went on television and everybody saw them all at once, they had no place to work, and they all disappeared.
That's just so upsetting and so disappointing. And
I know.
It's like, what can we do? What can we as entertainers do to correct that?
Can't do anything. Just do the best show you can. If you want to get into show business, do the best you can. Do as many shows as you can to get the experience. But as far as what your goal is, if some magician said to me, if I said to a magician who's just starting out, what is your goal? Where do you want to end up performing? And if they said to me Las Vegas, I'd say, well, you don't realize that's just going to be maybe a month thing, and you may not even come back. There are other people who are going to be trying to get your jobs. There are other people who are going to be going in there wanting less money. It's almost impossible in today's world to make a living doing magic. Most of the magicians that are successful are from wealthy families, and they have money from some way to invest in it. You don't see too many poor kids anymore starting out in magic and becoming superstars. Lance Burton was probably one of the last ones. Mm-hmm. Lance is retired now. He lives in a beautiful home in Las Vegas, and he could care less about, what's going on out there because it's changed. We talked about it too. All of the older entertainers are just disgusted with where show business is. I love it. It's been my occupation, and it's been my love all my life. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking for. I would actually look for a regular job if I didn't have work ahead of me. I'd actually be looking for a regular job. I just started Social Security this month, so that's going to help out. But when I was a kid, you retired from your work. You can't retire from your job today because you have to pay your bills.
Right.
And the bills are so expensive. And if you want insurance, and if you want to keep your teeth right, and I see people with bad teeth, and I wonder, why don't they fix their teeth? Well, to fix your teeth sometimes costs $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. Well, most people don't even have enough to pay their car insurance or something. It's just America's falling apart. And I don't know what to do. 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 I don't know what to do And I'm absolutely disgusted with the Congress. It's the worst Congress in the history of the United States. Nobody can talk. Nobody can get anything done. It's all about posturing, and it's just crazy.
It is. And I come back to it. I know the answer is no, and I do respect that. I'm not trying to negate your answer, but there are people out there like me who maybe ignorantly have hope that it'll all come back around and that we can correct it. Is there anything we can do as entertainers to infiltrate the system?
How old are you?
I'm 20.
You're 20 years old. It's hard to do it with someone so young. But if you were 20 years old, have you seen your life? If you look back at it, is every single year you got older, was it better than the last year as far as the things happening around you and things getting better? Is it better for you right now as a 20-year-old than it was when you were maybe 9, 10, 11? Or is it worse? Is it getting worse or is it getting better as you grow older?
In terms of
everything. I would assume when I was a kid, everything got better every year. I learned more. Things were newer. Things were neater, and you got money and you could afford stuff. Don't you feel that way? Then when you were 9 years old or 10 years old, things have always gotten better.
Yeah, you kind of do out of, I guess, with the way the economy is, sort of blissful ignorance on my part. Being in college, I'm able to pursue my passion.
But then you can't look back as a 20-year-old person. You can't look back and say, how can we make it get to where it was when I was 11?
Right.
You can't. You can't. So that's the answer to your question. How do you do it? If you love entertaining and magic and ventriloquism, go out and do all the shows you can, do the best job you can, and whatever. But I'm telling you, you can't go back. That's why they say the good old days. Everyone says the good old days.
Right.
When you're 50 years old, you're going to look back at this time, 2014, as the good old days, because you're going to see things happening as you get older that you won't believe, how kids are acting and how people are treating you and how the society is becoming just crazy, and just our thoughts and our interests are all in the wrong subjects. And you know what I mean? You can't go back.
Absolutely. No going back. It's just hope that eventually the progression sort of doesn't become destructive to it.
Exactly. You see a lot of old people. What do they like to do? They like to listen to music. They like to do things that they did when they were kids. That's why the Red Skelton Tribute Show was so successful.
Mm-hmm.
People, older age people would come to my show, and when they'd leave, they'd say, I haven't laughed like that, or I haven't felt like that in 40 years. That's the way entertainment used to be when they were kids. And now, when they come to Branson, there's a lot of great shows here, but there's nothing that maybe some of the tribute artists do, other tribute artists. They do the same thing because they're bringing them back to their when they were young people and stuff. But all of the new stuff they don't care about. And when you get older, believe it or not, all of the new stuff that comes about when you turn 40 or 50, you're not going to understand because it's a whole new generation. You've heard the term generation gap?
Yes.
There's always a generation gap. When you have kids, your kids are going to be into completely other things than you were. You won't understand why they want to do that and why, I'm sure a lot of parents ask these kids, why do you want to go on television and be on America's Got Talent? Do you realize the odds of that? And a lot of these kids, most of these kids who leave these shows cry and they don't understand why they didn't win. They're too young to know that you got to lose a lot. You don't win all the time. And now in school, they're giving awards for everyone who enters a competition. When I was a kid, you gave a first, second, and third. Now everybody gets an award just like everybody's a winner.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a whole different style of teaching people. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a whole different style of teaching. I'm glad I'm not in school. I don't think I could make it through school nowadays. The pressure on kids and the bullying. I never got bullied when I was a kid. No one shot kids. No one would run into a school with a weapon and shoot anybody. That was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it isn't because of drugs or anything. It's just because kids are left alone and they're beat. There's a lot of kids that are abused, and then their parents leave them and they don't give them any attention at all. And like gay kids who kill themselves because they don't want to come out. because they're told by their parents that it's bad and God, you're going to go to hell and all this stuff.
Yeah.
These poor kids sit in closets and they blow their brains out because they can't tell anybody and they're beat up at school. If I had to go through that when I was in school, I would have not graduated. My life is more important to me than all the laws and the regulations that we set in society. And I hate to be such a downer, but when people call me and ask me to do an interview, the last thing I want to do is just say everything you want to hear. I'm telling you as an older man how wonderful it was when I was a kid, and even before me, like during World War II. If you read any history about World War II, all of America was dancing. It was the big band era and all those big orchestras, and we were in a war, and the only way to relieve yourself from that war and your husband or wife being overseas fighting is to be entertaining. And my mom told me that when I was a kid. She says, entertaining is a great occupation because it'll never die. There will always be entertainment. There will be entertainment during wars and bad times and good times, and she was right. The thing she didn't tell me is that the entertainment itself would change and the kinds of acts. When I see people like Lady Gaga and that stuff, I'm completely at a loss for words of how they get paid for that.
Right.
You know, I just don't get it. And then I have so many friends. I know Johnny Carson's manager, ex-manager. He's in his 80s, and he was Johnny Carson's manager. He brought the Beatles to America. He was one of the biggest managers in show business, and he's now out of work, and nobody, you know, he's out of work. He has a little job, but he should be a wealthy man. He should, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And nobody's going to hire him today because his views of show business are all from the 60s and the 50s. Well, these kids running television today they're your age, or they're 25, 30.
Yeah.
And they're writing all of these crazy shows, you know. I don't see how, I'm like, not, who's one of, baby, what's her name? The little baby not the baby, but the little girl, the redneck girl.
Honey Boo Boo?
Honey, yeah. I mean, how does someone get a television show? I know so many people that would die to have their own television show, and then it's given to the duck hunters and all this stuff. I just don't get it. I think television has died. I think that television died about 10 years ago for me. I used to watch The Tonight Show every night, and now there's kids on there doing it that I don't even know who they are, you know. I did the Letterman show one time, and it was a terrible experience.
Yeah,
they just treated me terrible, you know, and I just went home and I said, I'm not going to do that again. Well, they called like 2 days later and said, would you please come back? And I said, I'm not if I'm going to be treated the way I was the first time. Right. I'm not doing this. I'm doing this. This is my living. I make my living doing this. And most professional entertainers, they don't care about, they like the other entertainers, and it's part of their circle, and they're best friends of them. But they're more interested in what they're doing than the gossip and everything about who's doing what and who's married to who now and where, you know, all that stuff. They're more interested in minding their own business and doing their work and making a living. Now, I love show people. I mean, all my best friends in the world are magicians. I'm actually going to be buried in Colon, Michigan. I bought a plot when I had cancer in 2010.
Yeah.
I bought a tombstone. I have a grave site. It's already ready for me to be put in it because I thought I was going to die. And that graveyard, there's a new book that's just been written. It's called A Magician's Graveyard. I can't remember the exact name. It was written by Al the Only. And if you know anything about Colon, Michigan, Abbott's magic company, the graveyard in Colon, Michigan has about 50 magicians buried there. Blackstone's buried there. Carol Fox and Duke Stern and Bill Baird and so many great magicians. And Norm Nielsen, I think, is going to be buried there too. Johnny Thompson's going to be buried there right next to me. We have our sites together.
Interesting.
So it's becoming like it'll be a neat place for people of the future, even lay people, to go in there and say, wow, these are all famous magicians that are buried here. And I'd rather be buried there than in some little town where nobody is ever going to know where you're buried. Because in Colon, what they do during the get-together, the convention every year, is they all go out to the graveyard at night and they sit by each grave and they tell stories about the person. And I'd rather be remembered that way than, you know, just to be planted someplace and as Red Skelton says, don't take life serious. You're never going to make it out alive.
That's so true.
You know? Yeah.
That is so true. Well, Tom Mullica, such candor and such a wonderfully appreciated, if way too much missing of a worldview these days, and such an attitude toward show business I wish we could rekindle. But
most of them have that attitude. Most people don't say anything about it. If you get with a bunch of older people, they'll say the same things I'm saying right now.
And I appreciate
it. They're more positive all the time, and I like to tell the truth, and that's why I'm not a big deal. I'm just me, and I just mind my own business. And but I hope it all came through clear on your end. You sort of chopped along a little bit, but I hope I came out clear.
Oh, you absolutely did, and it's very much appreciated. You're a big deal to me and to a lot of our listeners out there who very much respect your career and admire you and respect your opinion. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.